Hello, I'm Christina from Blue Ridge Hospice Grief and Loss Support. I'm one of the grief counselors here, and today I'm going to be reading a book. This book is called Nadia the Willful. It is about grief. It is also about things like stubbornness and flashy tempers and how those may not be things we enjoy about ourselves all the time, but they are things that can help us tell our stories and process our grief. So I hope you enjoy this as much as I do, and I will get to reading it. This is by Sue Alexander, and the pictures, these gorgeous pictures, are by Lloyd Bloom. And Sue says, "Because of Richard, who lives in my heart." In the land of the drifting sands, where the Bedouin moved their tents to follow the fertile grasses, there lived a girl whose stubbornness and flashing temper caused her to be known throughout the desert as Nadia the Willful. Nadia's father, the Sheikh Tariq, whose kindness and graciousness caused his name to be praised in every tent, did not know what to do with his willful daughter. There's a picture of a father and his willful daughter. Only Hamid, the eldest of Nadia's 6 brothers and Tariq's favorite son, could calm Nadia's temper when it flashed. "Oh, angry one," he would say, "shall we see how long you can stay that way?" And he would laugh and tease and pull her dark hair until she laughed back. Then she would follow Hamid wherever he led. One day before dawn, Hamid mounted his father's great white stallion and rode to the west to seek new grazing ground for the sheep. Nadia stood with her father at the edge of the oasis and watched him go. Hamid did not return. Nadia rode behind her father as he traveled across the desert, from oasis to oasis, seeking Hamid. Shepherds told them of seeing a great white stallion fleeing before the pillars of wind that stirred the sand, and they said that the horse carried no rider. Passing merchants, their camels laden with spices and sweets for the bazaar, told of the emptiness of the desert they had crossed. Tribesmen, strangers, everyone whom the Tariq had asked, sighed, gazed into the desert, saying, "Such is the will of Allah." At last, Tariq knew in his heart that his favorite son, Hamid, had been claimed, as other Bedouin before him, by the drifting sands. And he told Nadia what he knew, that Hamid was dead. Nadia screamed and wept and stamped the sand, crying, "Not even Allah would take Hamid away from me," until her father could bear it no more and sternly bade her into silence. Nadia's grief knew no bounds. She walked blindly through the oasis, neither seeing nor hearing those who would console her. And Tariq was silent. For days he sat inside his tent, speaking not at all and barely tasting the meals set before him. And here's that picture. Then on the 7th day, Tariq came out of his tent. He called all of his people to them, and when they were assembled, he spoke. "From this day forward," he said, "let no one utter Hamid's name. Punishment shall be swift for those who would remind me of what I have lost." Hamid's mother wept at the decree. The people of the clan looked at one another uneasily. All they could see was the hardness that had settled in on the Sheikh's face and the coldness that was in his eyes. And so they said nothing, but they obeyed. Nadia, too, did as her father decreed, though each day held something to remind her of Hamid. As she passed her brothers at play, she remembered games Hamid had taught her. As she walked by the women weaving patches for the tents and heard them talking and laughing, she remembered tales Hamid had told her and how they had made her laugh. And as she watched the shepherds with their flock, she remembered the little black lamb Hamid had loved so much. Each memory brought Hamid's name to Nadia's lips, but she stilled the sound. And each time she did so, her unhappiness grew until finally she could no longer contain it. She wept and she raged at anyone and everything that crossed her path. Soon, everyone at the oasis fled her approach, and she was more lonely than she had ever been before. One day, as Nadia passed the place where her brothers were playing, she stopped to watch them. They were playing one of the games Hamid had taught her, but they were playing it all wrong. Without thinking, Nadia called out to them, "That is not the way. Hamid said that first you jump this way and then you jump back." Her brothers stopped their game and looked around in fear. Had Tarek heard what Nadia had said? But he was nowhere to be found. "Teach us, Nadia," said the youngest brother. And so she did. She told them of all the other games and how Hamid had taught her to play them, and she spoke of Hamid and felt an easing of the hurt that was within her. And so she went on speaking about him. She went where the women sat at their loom and spoke of Hamid. She told them tales that Hamid had told her, and she told how he had made her laugh as he was telling them. At first, the women were afraid to listen to the willful girl and covered their ears, but after a time, they listened and they laughed with her. "Remember your father's promise of punishment," Nadia's mother warned her when she heard that Nadia was speaking of Hamid. "Cease, I implore you." Nadia knew that her mother had reason to be afraid, for Tarek, in his grief and bitterness, had grown quick-tempered and sharp of tongue. But she did not know how to tell her mother that speaking of Hamid had eased the pain she felt. And so she said only, "I will speak of my brother, I will." And she ran away from the sound of her mother's voice. She went to where the shepherds tended the flock and spoke of Hamid. The shepherds ran from her in fear and hid behind the sheep, but Nadia went on speaking. She told of Hamid's love for the little black lamb and how he had taught it to leap at his whistle. Soon the shepherds left from their hiding and came to listen. They told their own stories of Hamid and the little black lamb. You can see the lamb there. The more Nadia spoke of Hamid, the clearer his face became in her mind. She could see him smile and the light in his eyes. She could hear his voice, and the clearer Hamid's voice and face became, the less Nadia hurt inside, and the less her temper flashed, and at last she was filled with peace. But her mother was still afraid for her willful daughter. Again and again she sought to quiet Nadia so that Tarek's bitterness would not be turned against her. And again Nadia tossed her head and went on speaking of Hamid. Soon all who listened could see Hamid's face clearly before them. Oh, here are those pictures. One day, the youngest shepherd came to Nadia's tent, calling, "Come, Nadia, see Hamid's black lamb. It has grown so big and so strong." But it was not Nadia that came out of the tent. It was Tarek. On the sheik's face was a look more fierce than the desert hawk, and when he spoke, his words were sharp as a sword. I have forbidden my son's name to be said, and I promised punishment whoever disobeyed my command. So shall it be. Before the sun sets and the moon casts its first shadow on the sand, you will be gone from this oasis, never to return. No, Nadia cried, hearing her father's words. I have spoken, roared the sheik. It shall be done. Trembling, the shepherd went to gather his possessions, and the rest of the clan looked at one another, uneasily and muttering to themselves. In the hours that followed, fear of being banished in the desert made everyone turn away from Nadia as she tries to tell them stories of Hamid and the things he had done and said. And the less she was listened to, the less she was able to recall Hamid's face and voice. And the less she recalled, the more her temper raged within her, destroying the peace she had found. By evening, she could stand it no longer. She went to where her father sat, staring at the desert, and stood before him. You will not rob me of my brother Hamid, she cried, and I will not let you. Tarek looked at her, his eyes colder than the desert night. But before he could utter a word, Nadia spoke again. Can you recall his face? Can you still hear his voice? Tarek started in surprise, and his answer seemed to come unbidden to his lips. No, I cannot. Day after day I've sat in the spot where I last saw him, trying to remember the look, the sound, the happiness that was my beloved son. But I cannot. And he wept. Nadia's tone became gentle. There is a way, honored father. Listen. And she began to speak of Hamid. She told of walks that Hamid had taken and talks that they had had. She told how he taught her games, told her tales, and calmed her when she was angry. She told many things that she remembered, some happy and some sad. And when she was done telling, she said gently, Can you recall him now, father? Can you not see his face? Can you not hear his voice? And Tarek nodded through his tears. For the first time since Hamid had been gone, he had smiled. Now you see, Nadia said, her tone more gentle than the softest desert breezes. There is a way that Hamid can be with us still. The sheik pondered what Nadia had said. After a long time, he spoke, and the sharpness was gone from his voice. Tell my people to come before me, Nadia. I have something to say to them. When they were all assembled, Tarek said, From this day forward, let my daughter Nadia be known not as the willful, but as the wise. And let her name be praised in every tent, for she has given me back my beloved son. And so it was. The shepherd returned to his flock, kindness and graciousness returned to the oasis, and Nadia's name was praised in every tent, and Hamid lived again in the hearts of all who remembered him. The end. So this story is one of my favorites because it reminds us to tell our own stories. And I just wanted to let you know that if we have heard your story, we honor it and we remember it. And we are thinking about you, even though we may be far apart from each other right now. And that should you need us, we are always here. All right. Thank you so much.